Honored to have with me in studio James Spader. James Spader, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
You seem. Could you move this a little closer? Thanks. I don't have. I like to have my buttons and meters, but in this studio we don't have them. You're very very busy.
I am.
Is that something that you do by choice? Is that a survival mechanism that actors have, or is it just you like to act?
I probably act right now significantly more than I would like to.
You do.
But
Why do you do it? You could just not. That's the especially since you have a series, you would think that you could at least between seasons just bow out. But like, because I was watching an interview you did, I think it was to promote. I don't remember what you were promoting. You got so many things going on, but you were saying you did Blacklist, then you left Blacklist, went right to Age of Ultron, then you left Age of Ultron, right to the next season of Blacklist, and it's just been going on and on.
I took a break this past spring.
Between the two seasons, between season 2 and season 3?
I did.
And
that was a great relief. But I think I'm not a very good planner, and I'm not very forward thinking. So I'll read a piece of material and be intrigued by a story or a character,
Mm-hmm.
and get excited by it, and say yes with a complete disregard for what the obligation really will be.
Gotcha.
And I must say, I picked well with the Blacklist in that, listen, it's a demanding job, but it has its satisfaction, and it's something that changes all the time.
Yes.
And it's something that surprises and still piques my curiosity. And so it's in terms of acting, for as much of the year as I do, this has been a very, very good choice.
Right, because you've been able to find things that you actually are kind of passionate about.
Yeah, and that I enjoy, and that allow for variety.
Right.
And I like that. But I mean, when I was making it's also just a function of television. When I was just making films,
Mm-hmm.
I would take, large chunks of the year where I, would just live my life outside of acting work.
Yeah.
But it's a function of television that it's more demanding in terms of your schedule, but that's fine. You get paid very well, and
Mm-hmm.
you make a better living. And then again, when all of a sudden I was sent, got the phone call from Joss Whedon and said, would you be interested in working on the next Avengers? Again, I didn't really think, well, I'm going to wrap this first season of the Blacklist and fly 2 days later to London and start shooting this film.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to finish that and fly back to New York and start shooting the Blacklist again. I didn't really think about that. And you know what? It's a good thing I really didn't dwell on it, because we had a great time, and it was very different,
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm sure in the moment you're probably thinking, like, I'd really like a break right now. But then once you get the break and you get to look back on what you've done, you're probably very glad that you've done the series, that you did
oh
the
no,
movie,
and I had a grand time.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was I have a wonderful life.
But
I can't really complain about anything.
It's interesting that you don't consider yourself a forward-thinking person, because, as I was thinking about your kind of whole career, not many people have had careers as long as you, with characters that have been as relevant as your characters. Like, each generation that you go through in your own life, you tend to hit on a character or a set of characters that speak to that generation and is relevant to you as where you're at in your life. You had success in the 80s, and then you move on, and in the 90s you have Boston Legal, and then you move on and you have this series, but it's not something that you're conscious of as you're going.
Not at all.
There's no grand plan.
It was completely. It's all been inadvertent.
How does that make? feel good when you reflect back on it, or is it kind of
I never reflect on
you don't
it. No.
you don't ever reflect back on like, geez, I've accomplished a lot.
No, only, when questioned about it or faced with it.
I guess
No, I don't.
that's healthy. Do you pay attention to critiques of your work and things like that, or do you let the work exist where it's at and then move on to the next thing?
I generally am working on the next thing by the time something is critiqued.
Yeah, which is great. Now, when you're talking about staying kind of excited by what you're doing, I would imagine the Blacklist is a perfect show for that because while it does have a story arc going through the whole season, each episode is kind of also a standalone piece, meaning there's a new villain, there's a new mission for each episode that allows
To
you
a
to
certain degree,
yeah,
there's that also has shifted, which
yeah,
is the sort of model for the show has shifted as well. I mean, it can constantly changing, but there was a very real desire when the show was first airing to keep a prudent balance between the procedural aspect of the show and the sort of standalone episodes
sure,
to a serialized story, just because you're just starting to bring your audience in and so on, and so you want people to enter the series at any point and be able to follow what's happening and so
right,
on. As we started to build an audience and then found our audience, eh, that has shifted again,
mm-hmm.
and also truly based on the nature of the storyline that you're working with. And some storylines solve themselves in an episode or two or three, and some of them take longer than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and sometimes you won't. You'll go back after 3 episodes or
Yes,
whatever and be like, "Hey,
and
remember that
address
loose end?
something from
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Here's the tying up of it."
I
Um,
mean, we've actually been able to go back. We've been able to go back a whole season.
right. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those shows where it was kind of high concept when it's introduced. Like, this is what the concept of the show is, and you start as a viewer. I'm wondering, like, but how do they maintain this? Like, the episodes are great, and they were able to do. I mean, it was a very long first season, and it was consistently good. But you start to think to yourself, how do you maintain it? And I think, I guess the writers have done a great job of kind of reinventing the show. Like, okay, we're onto something. How do we reinvent it to extend it into a second season without forgetting what made it good, and so on with the third season?
I
How
think that intent was in place right from the start.
from the beginning,
Very much
so
so.
they knew this is
It
something that
really was the only. I mean, it really was. I mean, the very first conversation I ever had with the writers after I read the pilot, before I shot the pilot,
mm-hmm.
was about that. Was, are we going to take advantage of this broad landscape
Yeah,
and the opportunity you have with this premise and these characters to go in any direction at any time as quickly as you can?
yeah,
Are we going to take advantage of
yeah,
that? Are we going to really take advantage of the element of surprise and detours and misdirects,
right.
and having stories connected and taking 2 steps forward and then a step back?
Mm-hmm.
Are we really going to take advantage of that? And if we are, then I'm interested.
And obviously, they said we are, and you did. How closely do you work
Very.
with the writer still now? So you're kind of in there going, okay, where are we going with this? What are we
Well, I'm
doing
not
with this?
in there because I'm in New York and they're in Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
But we speak on the phone all the time, and from every stage from story idea to final draft script.
Wow. Do you like doing that better than just acting? Like, do you like having your hands on this thing and realizing that, as this thing is expanding, you're not only responsible for the character, but you're a part of the whole process of building?
In terms of my character, that seems to always have been the case. In terms of, I've always, first of all, in working in film, I've worked a lot with writer-directors.
Uh-huh.
So my relationship has always been one very good communication and collaboration with each other. And then on certain things that I've worked on, it's been more expensive than that. But mainly because of the fact that they tend to be in those projects where the character affects and is affected by much more than just the scenes that he's in.
Right. You said, and it was funny because I watched an interview that you did recently, and then I watched an interview that you did, like, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago. And in both interviews, you said the stranger the better. That seems like that's been a philosophy since you started this thing.
I guess, although it could be less mysterious than that or less interesting than that, it also could have been that the interviewer mentioned that earlier Stranger's Better in the more recent interview. And so
you figured
it came up again.
Right.
But yeah, it may just be that I just have to cop to the fact that that's really been standard operating procedure for me for many years.
Yeah.
That's my taste, I guess.
Yeah. Now, do you like what comes of that? Because I would assume, you look like your character looks. People must approach you on the street thinking that you have the same mentality. You talk like your character. It's you. So do you want to kind of shake people and say, this isn't real life what I'm doing here, just because you see this a lot? Or do you kind of like that there's a mystique about you?
The conversations I have with people on the street are always polite and appreciative, from me at least.
Right.
Polite and appreciative and gracious and swift.
Yes. Like
so I don't really ever get
to that point.
To that.
Right. We're not going to get into the analysis of any character.
Everything. And it truly is not to diminish the appreciation and
of course
that I feel for people who enjoy the work or anything else. But most everything that comes out of my mouth in an encounter with someone is a conversation ender.
Right. Usually trying to figure out what is the path of least resistance. What can I say that's nice,
it's
polite?
Exit line.
Right. Exit line.
Because I'm going somewhere, or I'm with my family.
Right.
You know what I mean? And thank you very much. Yes, it's very sweet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you just keep moving too. That's
keep
the
moving.
trick too. You keep walking. So do you ever encounter though people who don't pick up on social cues, that are sitting there not realizing I'm giving you the opportunity to gracefully end the conversation with me so we don't have uncomfortable moments. And then do you have to say, look, I'm
perfectly comfortable saying I have to leave now.
Yeah. And I would imagine for someone like you, who we just said finds these projects and ends up working a lot, private time and family time has got to be very, very valuable to you.
Yes.
So you're sitting there going, so what do you do with yourself? Do you end up staying at home a lot just so you don't have to deal with that? Or do you insist on, you know what, I'm going to...
No, I'm pretty low profile anyway.
You are?
Yeah.
You can kind of get it. And do you still live in New York?
I do.
So that's got to be a benefit too, because I think in New York that's a little easier to pull off than in other spots.
Yeah.
I would think.
But I'm pretty low profile. Yeah. I know how to get from point A to point B.
Do you still go to like live music shows and stuff like that?
I do. Yeah.
You do? And so it's not, you don't have that, I don't want to be around a big public area.
I don't want to get trapped in a big public area.
Right. So that's the other thing. You have your exit lines, and you also know, okay, I'm going to enjoy the show, but I know where I am. I know.
It's generally smart to go in after lights go down. And leave before lights come up.
Right.
And to be absent during intermission.
Yes. Yeah.
Just sort of very practical things.
Right. Like be there when people are focused on the stage. And then you can focus on the stage, and before people lose their focus, be gone. That's smart. And I guess you've been doing it long enough that you figured that out.
Buses are difficult.
Buses are probably not great, and you're not a subway guy, I would imagine.
They're pretty swift. Subways are quick. So sometimes
you can get on and off.
You get on and off,
but if you're going borough to borough, you probably.
And if you're engaged with what's going on, and you're.
Yeah. You can also.
And also, most people aren't expecting to see people in certain places.
So they spend the first 5 minutes like looking at you like that's not him. I
Right.
don't think that's him. And if you can get that 5 minutes out of the way, you're at the door. You're good.
But
You're
to
golden.
be fair, I haven't been on the subway in a couple of years.
Right. So it's probably better off, especially because TV, I think, gives people this expectation that they know you better than a film does because you're in their living room every week.
Without question.
And it's episodic.
I mean, the city is for me, it's one of the greatest cities on earth because it's a walking city.
Right.
So I walk.
Yeah, you can always.
everywhere
There's
I
always
can.
a corner to turn. I'm just gonna. Yeah, you don't mind taking the long way if you have to. Did you realize too when you jumped on, because you've done so much work on series, you must have a pretty good concept of how these things work and where they're going to be successful and what's a good move and what's not a great move. When you jumped on The Office late, it was towards the end of the run, and you would have known it was the end of the run. I'm sure it was good to know that you were just there for a limited amount of time, so it wasn't like you were trying to take anybody's place. But did you know what kind of an impact you would have? Because I feel like fans of that show loved the character that you played, which is a rare thing when the main character of a show leaves and you come in as a new character towards the end of a run. For that character to be a loved character, I think is a rare thing.
I don't know about that perspective, but I know that the whole thing snuck up on me.
Mm-hmm. How so?
Well, I had met with the head writers of the show.
Okay.
And to talk with them about maybe something else at some time, or just to have a sort of conversation. It was at a time where I was between jobs
Mm-hmm.
and was thinking about what might be fun to do at some point. And so we were just sort of talking about other stuff, maybe.
Right.
And getting to know each other thing.
And then they said, "Hey, we have the
No.
Okay.
No. And then months later, they called up and said, we had a great time talking with James, and we're doing a finale of the season. Steve Carell is leaving, and so we have a funny conceit where we're having a whole bunch of people coming in and applying for the job as new manager, and we've got some interesting people coming in. And, Will Ferrell's doing a little visit, and Jim Carrey's going to be, and a whole bunch of Ray Romano, and all the people that showed up. And we've written something that we think James would have fun with, and we'd love to have him come do it. And it would just be great fun, no strings attached. It would just be great fun, and we will do it truly like whatever time of day he wants to come in, whatever's easier, it'll be so low impact. It'll just be such fun, and it'll just be goofing around. It'll just be great.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, well, okay, say no to that. It seems like great fun.
Yeah.
So I went in and did it, and I had a ball, and it turned out well. And then they aired it, and then all of a sudden we got a phone call, and they said, we just love that character, Robert California. People seem to be responding to it. And so in what capacity could we get him to come and play Robert California next year? In any capacity, would he consider doing that?
So even if you jumped in for an episode, if you did whatever you could do.
What we could do. And at the exact same time that I was offered that, Steven Spielberg offered me that role in the film Lincoln.
Right.
But the role but they're offered at the same time, but the Office season started, like in July or whenever it was. And this was all offered to me sometime in the sort of early spring.
Okay.
And that was going to start in July, but the Lincoln film wasn't going to start until like October or something.
Okay.
Okay. And I wasn't going to be earning very much on the Lincoln film. Everybody worked on that film because it was such a huge film.
Right.
And they didn't know how much of an audience it would have. Everybody was working for a greatly reduced fee.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I was broke at the time. And so I was like,
that's it.
Oh my God, I'm going to have to commit to this thing that I wanted very badly to do Lincoln.
Right.
But it meant committing to something months and months, more than 6 months in advance, or 6 months in advance, for something where I really wasn't going to be able to pay my bills with the amount that I was going to be earning. And so if something came along, that another film or something else came along in the interim that was a conflict with that, where I'd actually be able to earn more money doing,
Yeah.
uh, how could I call up in the last minute? And Steven Spielberg was someone who I'd known through the years. Socially, I'd never worked together, but we'd known each other sort of off and on and friends. And I said, I cannot call him up and say, so I either can't do it or I've got to figure something else out to be able to do this. So I suggested to my agents, I said, you know what? Why don't you call them up and say, okay, forget about coming and visiting. What would you guys think of an entire season? Like,
Yeah.
because they had already said, like, we'll take whatever we can get.
Yeah.
And so I said, great. So how about an entire season? But I get like whatever it was, 2.5 months or whatever it is in the fall where I just disappear.
Right.
Okay. And they said, great.
Perfect. That's
So
what
it
we'll do.
worked out. I mean, how could I have had a better year?
Right. So you had,
It was
yeah,
like a fantastic year.
it ends up
I
being
went
a
and
great
played
year.
this
Then
crazy weird guy on The
Right.
Office, and then went off and did Lincoln, and then came back and was the weird guy on The Office again for
Yeah.
a bit.
and then
and-
Blacklist comes right after that, and
Yeah, it worked out.
that's amazing. That's an amazing story. Well, Blacklist season 3. First of all, that also explains why you keep working, because if acting is so up and down that you're worried about being broke. Like as recently as a few years ago, that I would keep doing the Age of Ultrons and do everything you can. But Blacklist season 3, October 1st. It's on Thursdays at 9 p.m. on NBC. It's really a great show, and it's one of these shows that if it wasn't well done, could theoretically fall apart, and it's not even close to falling apart. It's still you do a great job, and the writers do a great job.
Thank you.
So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to talk to you, and hopefully I'll get to talk to you again.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Sam Roberts back here in the SiriusXM studio with the most flattering camera angle that I could find. Listen to my show every night on XM 103, Sirius 206. It's Sam Roberts Show, Monday through Friday, starting at 9 p.m. Eastern and going all the way to midnight Eastern at 6 p.m. on the West. We got celebrities all the time. You just saw a celebrity interview. If you want more and you want to find them as soon as they get uploaded to this channel, go to the side of the page and subscribe. You can get all kinds of celebrity interviews, clips from my show, wrestling stuff. You never know what you're going to find on the Not Sam YouTube channel. So subscribe.